Hello, welcome to episode 3 of the Brains and Weans podcast with your host, Jen Rollage. This episode is all about how I overcame the fear of being disliked. So, this is going to be a combination of psychology and neuroscience-based tools, but with some of my own experience and how I applied those tools to myself to be able to overcome the fear of being disliked. So, as I kind of spoke about in the earlier episodes, I really struggled to fit in. When I was younger, I struggled with making friendships. I've always struggled with relationship forming. And I think that because of this experience and from being bullied and stuff in school, I've really carried the burden of being scared of what people think of me or being scared of people disliking me. I've really fallen victim to people pleasing aggressively throughout my life, and I would actually say it's something that I've only really managed to overcome in recent years. I think building a business really exposes you very quickly to being disliked. So I think that going through the process of building a business, especially an online business where you're continuously putting content out into the world, and content like this, which is quite vulnerable and exposing about yourself in a way that people just don't do day to day, definitely is like fucking exposure therapy, because it's just exposed me completely to people's opinions and just having to like live with them and then fucking move on with my day. I remember that when we first started Built to Coach, me and Mark, we ran ads, and one of the ads went fucking viral. It got like hundreds of thousands of views, and I got abused, right, rinsed. And there was another couple, I think just a few reels that kind of like got high engagement, ended up in the Explore page and stuff like that. And there were people calling me fat and like slagging my appearance and stuff. Now, I have overcome the fear of being disliked. I don't give a fuck. The majority of the people leaving those comments are wee weirdos fucking wanking into socks in their mom's spare room. However, my husband does not take kindly to those comments, and he goes out his way to hunt these people. Never wrong my husband, because he will fuck up your life. He hunts them down, finds their information, and signs them up to like signs their email addresses up to like spam accounts and like bots and all that, and basically ruins their fucking email addresses. He does also find a lot of people's personal information, but I've specifically instructed him that he can't do anything with that because it really would cause me a lot of problems. So if you've ever left a nasty comment about me or my appearance in any of my content, and your inbox has suddenly become flooded with spam, it was my husband. So I think that level of exposure, I think speaking at events, speaking on podcasts, being in rooms of people, filming content, like putting messages out there, you do very quickly become used to it and adjust to it. But I also think a huge part of it as well is that when you start working with people who really value what you do, you focus a lot more on the people who like you than the people that dislike you. And I think that a lot of the marketing that we do is focused on repelling people that we don't want to work with. So actually being disliked is a sign that my marketing is working well. So the more people who have opinions of me, negative opinions of me, who dislike me, who tell people actively that they dislike me, and they think that I'm a fucking cowboy or whatever the fuck else they want to call me, that's always a great sign for me that things are doing well. So thank you. But like I said before, like I've always kind of struggled with self-esteem, low self-esteem, struggling to fit in. I think that I've very much got used to becoming a version of myself that people would accept, and then like try to ignore and switch off that true self. So I would do a lot of mimicking and copying, masking. So I would follow a lot of what other girls liked, their interests. I can remember, it's so weird. I can remember, did I say it to Paul? And he was like, yeah, that's not normal. This is the story of my life. I say things that I have done or thought, and somebody tells me that's not normal. Like, that's honestly the fucking story of my life. I told Paul that I can remember people in school listening to certain music, and a lot of the time, I'm in Bulletproof Studios in Cooper. If you've ever been at Bulletproof, you know that Cooper is the owner's dog, and he's just started going mental barking there. I fucking shit myself. Shout out Cooper. And Aye, so what was I saying? A lot of time I say shit and then people go, yeah, that's not normal. So I said to Paul, when I was in school, I can remember people listening to music that I didn't know, right? So like I was a mosher in school, but deep down was really trying to fit in, so I was kind of scared to be an overt mosher at first. And I remember people listening to it. I can't even remember what the song was, right? But I would like, this is before Google, so I would like beg my mum for a CD because my dad used to burn CDs, like fucking loved burning a CD. I actually think it's so sad that we no longer get the joy of burning a CD off LimeWire for your car. Like there was nothing more thrilling in this life than downloading like hundreds of individual songs for like a mix, putting it on a CD, and then listening to that CD in your car relentlessly, right, to the point where you could never listen to it again because it was the only CD that you listened to in the car over and over. That is a part of life that I really, really miss because Spotify's fucking ruined it. But anyway, my dad used to download shit off LimeWire. My dad's good with computers, and he would burn CDs for us. So my mum and dad would never buy me a fucking CD. They're like, why would I spend 15 quid on an album when your dad can burn it for you for the cost of the fucking CD? But I begged for this album. I think it was the fucking Black Eyed Peas or some bullshit like that. And I would read the lyrics and I would learn it like line by line. So like everybody would read the lyrics, right? That's not the weird bit. But I would sit and rehearse it and read it and write it out over and over and over again until I knew it word perfect. So that if anybody was listening to the song in school or singing the song in school, I could join in and show that I knew the lyrics, right? So I used to do shit like that all the time. Or like copy what people were wearing. I can remember it being a pure thing of like people being like, oh, people copying, don't copy my outfits or don't copy my hair. I was copying your hair, babe, because I had no fucking ability to have an original thought and I wanted to be normal and fit in. So like I just wanted to scrape my hair back and get it off my face and out the road. Like I had no other choice but to copy. And I think a lot of that was to do with like masking and stuff like that. But a lot of it was just like trying to be accepted and ignoring my true self. And ignoring what I wanted. And I do think everybody does this, like to a certain extent. Everybody will go through a period of trying to fit in until they find out who they truly are. That's a huge part of being a young teenager. It's that transitional identity space where you are experimenting a lot with different things until you find out your true self. I think that just happened later in life for me. And I think being in abusive relationships probably had quite a lot to do with that. So I feel like now that I am confident and competent in myself, and I think when you get to your 30s as well, you really are just fucking unapologetic about who you are. Like, I really don't care. Like, see the people who I'm closest to and who I love and who I care about and who I value the opinions of, and same goes from a business perspective, like people that I respect, I care about their opinions of me. If they said to me, Jen, this is a bad move, or I think that you're doing this in a way that could be better, or I think you got this wrong, I will listen and take it on board. See, if you have no context for me, my life, how I live, how I make decisions, and you want to give me your opinion on what you think I'm doing, I just don't give a fuck, and I really am unaffected by it. But it's not by chance that I've got to this place, right? So a huge thing that we have to recognise, first and foremost, is that the brain is very, very impacted and driven by fear, right? Jean, my therapist, said a great thing to me, a great analogy, which is sometimes when your amygdala responds and the brain goes off, which is the fight, flight or freeze, right? Sometimes when that kicks off, remember, and if you don't know this, when the brain experiences either threat, actual threat or perceived threat, it processes it in the same way, right? So whether you are being chased through the jungle by a tiger or you are gone to a baby class and all the mums know each other and you've got nobody to sit with, right? Which has happened to me. Your brain perceives that threat in the same way. It can't differentiate between the two because fMRI studies will show overlap between the social pain and physical pain networks inside the brain. So your brain can't differentiate for what is a true threat and what is a potential threat, right? It just processes threat. And Jean puts us in a really handy analogy where it's like your brain thinks this, like the smoke alarms are going off because your brain thinks the house is burning down. when actually you need to be like, babe, calm down. It's just burnt toast, right? The smoke alarm goes off whether the house is burning down or whether the toast is burning, right? It's not able to differentiate between the two. So I love that analogy because that always sticks in my mind when I talk about this. A really good way to navigate this and manage this, and something that I have found so useful when it comes to getting trapped in that fear of others' opinions, is a process called affect labeling. So affect labeling is simply naming the emotion that you feel in that moment. Evidence shows us that it massively downregulates the nervous system and helps to switch back on the prefrontal cortex. So prefrontal cortex is right at the front of your brain. It's really small. It makes up like 5 to 10% of your overall brain composition, but it's like the CEO of the brain. So it makes all of the decisions. It's where processing sits. It's where thinking sits. It's where emotion sits, right? So anything that is your conscious, intelligent thought, right? Who you are, who makes decisions, who thinks rationally, that is all in the prefrontal cortex. And that gets switched off when the amygdala takes over. However, by going through the process of affect labeling and naming the emotion that you're feeling, you can switch it back on, right? So whenever I'm in those situations, I've spoken about this before, where when I went to my first Authority Network event back in the day, I was significantly overweight. I was a lot heavier than I am now. And obviously I was at an event that was like full of health and fitness coaches, right? So I was the biggest person in the room. And in that moment, the fear transported me back to being in the school dinner hall, right? I felt like it was like being back in the school dinner hall and I had nowhere to sit. Because when I went into the dinner hall and everybody sat in their groups, it was like fucking, do you remember the scene in Mean Girls when everybody's fell out with Katie Heron? Or like when it's like her first day at school and she's got nobody to sit and she eats her sandwich in the toilet. That was me. I genuinely used to eat my fucking pieces in the toilet sometimes, right? Because I had nowhere to go. That was how I always ended up going to the music department. Please don't feel sad, by the way. If you're listening, Paul says when I tell him shit like that, it makes me sad. It makes him sad. I'm not sad. I'm class now, so I'm all right. So like, that's exactly where I was transported back to emotionally. So I knew in that moment, right, okay, this is my inner child. And when I reflect back on that now, I wouldn't feel that now. Even if I was that size again or fucking twice that size, I would walk into that room with confidence. I don't give a fuck, right? But at that time, I found it really, really difficult because I was still establishing myself and who I was. And a lot of the fear of being disliked comes from a lack of self-acceptance. Now that I'm in such a strong place of self-acceptance, other people's opinions... Other people can't tell me what they think of me because it doesn't fit with what I think of myself. So I know who I am. Therefore, if they try and tell me that I'm something else, it's just like, I don't care because it's just like an error message. It just doesn't, that's not who I am. So I wouldn't internalise that. That's the difference. So I could recognise this is my inner child here. Like, this is my inner child who feels scared, who feels a lack of acceptance, who feels that fear of judgment. And when I reflect back on that now, I recognise that if I was able to stop in that moment and label that, and recognise that, I would have had a completely different experience. Because here's the thing, some of those people will have been judging me. It's not a fucking, like, unknown fact that a lot of health and fitness coaches are fat phobic. They just don't like fat people, right? They see fat as bad. And it's not their fault. They're trained to think that way. When their job constantly is helping people to lose fat, even when they're not aware of it, a lot of this happens in the subconscious. You might be a coach thinking, I never judge my overweight clients. You do. You're just not consciously aware of it, right? It often happens subliminally. So what happens... So what's happened in that room is that there have been a lot of people who are judging me, right? But there are also a lot of people who actually didn't even fucking notice I was there, right? So they don't give a fuck. So that was that was a projected self-judgment, right? Because I said this in the last episode, but like, what other people think of you is based entirely on what you think about yourself. So it was a projected self-judgment, right? I assumed that because I feel this way and I see myself this way, everybody sees themselves this way. And I spoke about this a bit in the first episode, but like, you know who you are deep down and you know every single version of yourself. Other people don't know that. They cannot see and know you in the way that you see and know yourself. So you assume that other people see the way that you see yourself in fucking 4D, and they don't. They only see the version of you that you choose to bring. So I think it's really important to recognise that the person that you think they dislike, they don't even know, right? Only you know that person, and only you have decided that you dislike them, therefore other people must. So what we have to remember, whenever you're in any of these social threat-based situations. So there are 5 social drivers in the brain. This is a model called the SCARF model. And I teach this to coaches in the Built to Coach portion of Built for Coaches. So the SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness, right? So these are 5 social drivers. And in social situations, we have all 5 of those, but we have one that is most dominant, right? So status is importance relative to others. People who are highest in status need to feel like they have status in the room that they are in, or it will feel threatening. So people who are highest in status will often avoid rooms that are growth focused, or rooms that are full of people who are more successful than them, or where they don't have a dominant role. They will want to be more of a leader than a participant, because they need to feel like they are accepted, that they belong, but that they hold weight right in that room. Certainty is they need to be able to predict the future. So these people need to know exactly how shit is going to go down. They need to know exactly what's going to happen. They need to know who's going. They need to know the dress code. Like, they need to know the flow of the day. They need to know the structure. They need to have certainty on what is going to happen in order for them to be able to feel safe. Autonomy is exactly what it says in the tin. These people need to feel like they have influence over their lives, their decision making, and the things that they do. If they are in a situation or a job or anywhere where they don't have autonomy over their decision making and the decisions that impact them, they will not operate well. Okay, and when they're in certain social situations where they just have to go along with a plan that is been pre-decided for them, that they've had no negotiation in, they will completely reject it, right? Relatedness is your sense of that status. Relatedness is all about relationships. So this is people who are highest in relatedness need to know that the relationship with others is being preserved above everything. So people highest in relatedness tend to be people pleasers because they're so focused on how everybody else feels, and people being able to be connected to them and like them, that takes priority over everything. And people who are highest in relatedness often disregard their own needs to prioritise the needs of other people. So these are the people often who are most impacted by the fear of being disliked, because they need to know that the relationships that they have are secure. They need to know that they're liked to be able to cope, basically, right? So that's relatedness. And then fairness is a sense of justice. So they need to know that they are being treated fairly and equally, the same as everybody else, or they will not be able to cope with that, right? So in any sort of social situation, if they see somebody getting preferential treatment, if they see cliques, or groups of people being treated differently, they will call it out, right? People who are highest in fairness need there to be justice and fairness for all, and they will also advocate for other people when they see a lack of fairness and justice, whether those people wanted to be advocated for or not, right? So depending on your biggest driver will depend on how you perceive social threat. So for some people, certain situations will not feel threatening. So for example, when I went to that Authority Network event and I immediately felt social threat, someone who is highest in status wouldn't have felt that, because they would think, great, I'm in a status-driven room with other high-status people, therefore I belong, right? People who are highest in relatedness, if they went along and all their mates are there and loads of people that they know, great, they've got a sense of belonging, right? Fairness, the Authority Network used to do this thing where they sat all the power room people, so the people who paid for the higher tier programme, at the front of the room, and everybody else at the back. And I remember loads of people having an issue with that because they thought it was unfair, they thought it was elitist. Those people are probably highest in fairness. Everybody here is not being treated the same. I think they thought that it was like a social driver, like an aspiring thing. And for some people it will have been, like an objective will have been sitting in those tables at the front. For a lot of people it just reinforced a sense of a lack of fairness or a lack of justice. So depending on your main driver will depend how you experience different social situations and what you will perceive as a threat. And that will also then influence the kind of people that you want to like and dislike you, and the things that you think they will dislike about you, right? So if you're high in relatedness, for example, you'll worry that, I've not done enough for them, or I've not been there enough for them, or I've not supported them enough, or I've not spoke to them enough, or I've not checked in on them enough, therefore they won't like me, they're going to fall out of me, right? If you are someone who is highest in autonomy, you're going to feel panicked by anybody else who takes that away from you, right? So you might feel like, I don't want to go along with this plan, and I don't want to just go ahead and do what everybody else says that I've got to do. But if I don't do that, then what's going to happen, right? Am I going to be rejected? Am I going to be cast aside? So you will internalise that threat. And although you recognise this is not for me, I don't want to go along with what everybody else is doing. I want to put my hand up and have a say. You will either speak out or assimilate. And actually, this is something that mine is autonomy. So that's my highest threat driver. So if I don't, shocker, business owner, highest in autonomy, could I figure that one out? And that's a huge part of the reason why I left my corporate career, because I didn't have complete influence and control over the kind of work that I wanted to do. And right before I was leaving, we started a project called Investors and People, which is essentially just a fucking badge, right? It's so meaningless. It's such an outdated process. But I worked for NHS GGC. They were under a lot of heat and fire over their COVID response, and a lot of pressure from the government over services, money spent, etc., etc. So we did the Investors and People process, which was, instead of actually materially making things better for staff, let's just get a badge that says we're a great employer. Fundamentally, from a values perspective, I disagreed with that so strongly that I was like, I just can't fucking be a part of this, because it stripped me completely of my autonomy. My job overnight went from being one thing into the next thing, and there was nothing that I could do about it. So I was like, fuck that, right? But other people will then assimilate and think, well, I don't have any choice here, but that's where the friction will come from, right? So what we need to understand for ourselves is, what is my main social driver and what's going to feel like a threat to me, right? What is the thing that I think other people are going to dislike me for? But what are the things that I dislike in certain social situations? And how much is that then influencing the judgments that I place in myself? Something that we have to recognise is that we all have an inner critic. We all have a self one and self two, right? Self one is your critical or telling self. Self one is the thought master. Here is what you are going to do next. Self two is the doer, right? That's the innocent, almost childlike version who just does the thing and then thinks about it secondary. If you watch children and how they learn, children do and try repeatedly, over and over and over again. Children don't accept failure as a message to stop. Adults do. Because when adults fail, self one takes over and says, you failed, don't try again, okay? And that self one is an inner critic that we adopt and we nurture over time. And we take on other people's criticisms as our own. So the more we hear criticisms and judgments either given to us or shared amongst adults, we start to develop those as our own inner critic narrative as we grow older, right? So what happens for quite a lot of people is, when they're going through any sort of thing that they want to do, process a change, passionate thing that they want to go after, big change they want to create in their life, they stop themselves because they say, I just don't believe that I can do it, right? The reality is that you will never believe that you can do something until you already do it. It's only when you're doing it that you go, oh shit, I'm doing this, right? So if you're waiting, if you want to do something and you're waiting on belief coming, that doesn't happen. Belief is secondary to action, right? The challenge with taking action is that if the opinions of other people are one of the influences that are stopping you, you are never going to get that data. So you're never actually going to get evidence that tells you that people do like you or that people do dislike you or what those people are thinking of you until you've done the thing. And even when you're doing the thing, you probably still won't get that information. So I get loads of nice DMs all the time. If sometimes when I post podcast clips, they'll go on the Explore page, or sometimes if I guest on another podcast, people who I went to school with or I used to work with in the past will message me and be like, I listened to your podcast and I saw your clip, and we chat and we catch up, and it's such a nice thing to do, right? And I love, please do that if you see this. If you're watching this on YouTube, or if I clip it and I put it out there, please actually reach out and message, because I love hearing from people from days gone by. But there will be so many people who watch this and go, who the fuck does she think she is? I went to school with her, she's a clown. My ex and his family, hello, because I know that yous probably watch these things, right? She's a liar, she's making it all up, blah, 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 whatever the fuck they want to say. those opinions are out there and are held by people, but do you know what? They're none of my business, right? Because what other people think of me is none of my business. And this is a huge thing to accept when you're trying to overcome the fear of being disliked, is that it's actually, you don't get the right to be inside other people's heads. And I think that's something that people underestimate quite a lot as well. As someone who coaches people to do exactly this and overcome the fear of being disliked, you are not on people's minds anywhere near the amount that you think that you are, because we are all the main character of our own story. We are all so consumed with ourselves. We don't really have much time and capacity for judgments for other people as much as we all think. If you feel obsessive or very consumed by the thoughts of other people, often this means that you are quite judgmental yourself. And this isn't a bad thing, right? It's something that we need to work on, but it doesn't make you a bad person if you are judgmental. Often judgment is learned. It's a conditioned behaviour that we learn from role models like parents, guardians, etc., right? Back in the day, when I was younger, everybody get fucking slagged. There were TV programmes dedicated to ripping the piss out of people. You couldn't do a single thing without fucking criticism, right? We live in a very different world now, where people are much more aware of the negative impact that has on folk. Thank fuck. However, like you definitely will always have people who have certain opinions of you and think it's okay to judge. But if you find yourself judging or thinking a lot about other people, what they're doing, and sharing your opinion on it, it's probably been a conditioned behaviour that you have learned from somewhere. Judgment is a natural human response because it is directly connected to that safety mechanism. So whenever we're scanning for threat, that error detection system in the brain is always looking for threat. And often when we see people doing something differently from what we are doing, or who look different from us, or who sound different from us, the brain will automatically perceive it as a threat, right? Therefore, judgment is the thing that protects you because you're judging the situation, right? So you are judging, is this right or is this wrong? If it fits wrong, then you'll formulate an opinion. And it's not that it's wrong, it's often just that it's different or unfamiliar from what you're used to, or it doesn't check out against your own morals and values, right? You hold a different opinion. So the reality here is that a lot of the judgments that you hold for other people are often based on, one, conditioned behaviour and things that you've learned to do, but two, a lot of the time because they show that they have something that is void in you, right? We see this a lot around, like in Glasgow, this is called riddy culture, right? Riddy means redneck, which means redneck, right? And not like redneck as in like an American redneck, as in a literal, like your neck going red from embarrassment, right? That's where the saying comes from. But it's a huge thing where I'm from, especially growing up in my working class area. Anything that you do is different as a fucking redneck, right? Who the fuck does she think she is? Like, major judgment of anybody who does anything against the norm, right? But all it is because it's a threat to those people in their circumstances. They are going to judge you for doing something that they would never consider possible for themselves. People will always give you advice based on their reality, never yours, right? And they're going to judge you based on their reality and not yours. So what you have to remember is that anything that you do that is marginally different is going to be judged by people because they see it as a threat. And another key thing here is that for you to engage in any change at all is threatening, but it's also threatening to other people because the change they're telling themselves that they can't do, you're shown as possible. So when you choose to engage in the difficulty and the growth and the pain of change, you're highlighting to them the things that they are trying to avoid, right? Therefore, that's going to come with judgment. And often people project this as a deflective thing, right? You'll hear this a lot if you've ever been on a weight loss journey and people say, you've lost too much weight now, you're too thin, right? 9 times out of 10, you're not. And the people saying that are fucking jealous because they wanted to do that and they didn't have the ability to be able to cope with the pain of change, right, in the way that you did. When I was leaving my job to set up my own business, literally everybody, right, the only people that believed in me were like my best pal, my husband, and Mark, my business partner. Every single other person said to me, what will you do for money? Well, I'm running a business and it will generate money. It's a risk. The NHS is a safe job. You can never be made redundant. It's a steady and secure salary. And I was like, yeah, but I also fucking hate it. So a lot of people would rather you were just fucking miserable but safe, right? I would rather be at risk and happy, okay, personally. And also as a business owner, you create your own safety. Your safety is not in the hands of someone else. But nobody, like, it's not that I don't think that those people believed in me. I think that it was just too outside of their own context to understand, like, what it was that I was going to be doing. And they thought about how their risk would impact them in their shoes. So they think, oh, I'm too averse to that risk and I don't understand what that looks like, therefore this is bad. When actually it wasn't bad, it was just unfamiliar to them. Had I worried about what they thought of me as a result of making that decision, where would I be now? Probably still in a job that I fucking hated, right? And I think that the key thing to recognise here is that people will always hold an opinion of you, right? Whenever they come across you, it's like I said, it's that automatic human response of judgment. Judgment is always present. It's what you do with judgment that matters. And I think that if you are someone who is trying to overcome the fear of being disliked, you need to challenge and critique your own judgments first. You need to look at your own judgments of other people and understand, where is this coming from and what does this highlight in me, right? What does that person have that I perceive as missing for myself? What is that person doing that I wish that I could do? Where is this judgment coming from? What does it highlight as a gap in me, right? Because a lot of the time when you feel that, it's a projection. And you need to understand where that's coming from first for you to then be able to show yourself, actually, if I can work on not really caring about what other people think about me, I'm also less impacted around actually judging and being aware of other people. I really don't know what a lot of fucking people are up to because I don't have the time. I'm too focused on me and my life and the things that I have my attention on. So sometimes when folks say to me, have you seen what fucking such and such is? I'm like, I don't fucking know what that is. I don't know who you're talking about. Don't get me wrong, I love a gossip, right? I'm an Isa bastard. Isa is a character for Still Game. If you've never watched Still Game, go and watch it and then it'll make sense. That's fucking human nature. My sister reposted a TikTok that was, I don't gossip, I spread awareness. And I was like, that's fucking spot on, right? Nothing wrong with that. However, I'm not actively, routinely, constantly fucking judging people for the things that they want to do. For the most part, I'm like, fucking on you go. See if you're not harming anybody, right? And you're not being a cunt. I wish you all the best, right? Go and fucking enjoy it. Another couple of things, just to round off this episode, that have really, really helped me overcome this, is that if someone is angry at me, it's their responsibility to tell me. I used to go through periods of time thinking that everybody was angry at me, or that I'd done something to people, or that I had pals who were phasing me out and weren't taking an interest in me anymore. And see now, if they're doing that, that's their responsibility to come and tell me. See if I've pissed them off, it's their responsibility to come to me and say, you pissed me off, right? I can't hold that fear or wonder about people being upset or people being annoyed or me having to adjust my behaviour on the basis of what I think someone else is thinking. You cannot do other people's thinking for them. So if they have something that they want to say, it's their responsibility to bring it to you. Until that point, and if that ever happens, don't waste fucking energy on it, because that's their responsibility. It's not yours to figure out. It's their responsibility to bring to you. And I think the key takeaway from this, and the message that I want to close this on, is that you have to accept that people will dislike you and you will be okay, right? Once you know who you are and you accept who you are and you like the person that you have become, you no longer need external validation to fit with that. I don't need anybody to tell me that I'm good, or that I'm like good at my job, or that I'm a good mum, or I'm a good wife, or that I'm any of these things. Obviously, it's nice to hear those things from the people that I love, but like I'm not dependent on people telling me that for me to know that it's true. And that's the key distinction. I don't need people to tell me that these things are the case for me to believe it. I know it's true and I can internally validate, and any external validation that reinforces that is a nice to have, but it's not a need to have. Once you can accept that, you can then go on the journey of not really being focused on understanding how you overcome the fear of being disliked, but actually how you go on the journey of liking yourself. I am of the firm belief that you don't have to love yourself. I think that loving yourself is a really high and hard to achieve objective because we are inherently human and flawed. I don't think you have to love every part of yourself, but you do need to like yourself and you do need to respect yourself. So I would focus more on that side of the journey. How do I build self-care as a constant principle? How do I honour my passions and interests? How do I fulfil my life's vision? And how do I treat myself with respect and the decisions that I make and the people that I surround myself with and the things that I spend my time on a day-to-day? Go on that path and focus less on the worry of dislike from other people and actually how you build yourself into a person that you like and that you respect, so that the impact of other people's opinions will carry a hell of a lot less weight. I hope that this has been useful. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Please let me know what you've taken away from this. Please let me know if there's any other tools, resources, frameworks, anything like that that I can help you with that will support you on this part of your journey. And obviously, again, this is probably something that I will speak in a lot more detail about further down the line, but I hope you've enjoyed this episode and I'll see you next time.